The next segment that we're going to go to is actually an interview with our special guest, Jess, our technical director. Thank you for joining us this week.
Happy to be here.
Jess, can you just share a little bit about what your position is here at Farm.One and what a typical day for you is like?
As Ina mentioned, I'm the technical director, and I work on a combination of software systems and the physical farming systems. My time is split between helping to, improve the quality of the equipment, to reduce downtime, to increase the efficiency of, the processes that are happening here every day on the farm. And then also to write some code for helping to, facilitate our program for the farm share, and also to facilitate the day-to-day operations on the farm, and some other cool things like that. So yeah, it's a dream job, to be honest.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever we have a spill, Jess is the first person that we call.
A spill.
Whenever there's a leak, Jess is the first person we call.
I normally am not. It's actually Justin who normally cleans up the leaks, but.
So how
Jess,
did you?
what's?
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
There must be a delay going through, so sorry about that. I was just curious about your background, Jess, because the one thing that I've noticed is you're writing software and you're also dealing with hardware systems and plumbing and all that. Are you just like a Swiss Army knife engineer, or what sort of training did you have to do this type of work?
Well, I think, as growing up, I always loved solving engineering problems and just had a sort of engineering mindset when it came to, fixing things around the house or even cooking or, a million different things. But I went to a liberal arts college, which was the key because it's a very general, it gives you a very general set of skills. My degree was in engineering, but it wasn't even specific engineering to anything. So I took all these electrical classes, these environmental classes, computer science classes, and sort of built a foundation for thinking about how systems work. Really, I think systems thinking is the main thing I got out of that. And then I immediately went and started working in the vertical farming space, and kind of having this well-rounded foundation, got my hands on a lot of different things, started building out some more industry-specific skills, learned how to Google really well and find the right websites to get parts and how they fit together, and think about the systems that other people have already created and how we can leverage them to achieve a desired outcome. And I think, that's sort of the foundation of how I've learned to do the things that I think I've started to build up some expertise in. And that's about it.
How much of your day is Googling things?
A lot of my day is Googling things. I mean, I think Google is a really powerful tool for, if you know how to use it well, for any person in any job. That's a computer job, I guess, desk job. So yeah. Rob probably has some similar experiences with just spending a lot of time finding out how to do things through Google.
Yeah, I think, if you want to make it like a little bit more grand, it's like, before I started Farm.One, I didn't know anything about hydroponics or anything, right? So, you just start with being interested in something. And I think part of like learning how to program is fundamentally about learning how to leverage existing technologies and match them together and figure out so you're never really doing anything from scratch, right? And so part of being able to Google well, I think, is knowing what to Google and how to distinguish good search results from others. But if I had to teach a kid like how to Google really well or how to do Pythagoras' theorem, I would choose Googling any day, right? Because it gives you so much more power.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll stop talking. All right.
My Googling's just asking Jess questions on Slack that he then Googles and sends me.
Yeah, exactly. Let me Google that for you, as I say.
Jess, you're also doing your master's right now, aren't you?
Yep.
Can you share a little bit about that too?
Yeah, so I'm actually just wrapping it up in sustainability management, which basically is the way that you integrate sustainability into an organization. And that could be a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization. And I think, in order to do that, you have to have some science skills to understand the physical dimensions of sustainability, whether that's water systems, whether that's, climate, all these different things that influence businesses and organizations on a science level. But then also you have to know about, sustainable marketing and what do people care about when they're looking at a product? Is it sustainability or is it its function? These types of things help you, build up a system where you can help companies improve their sustainability in a very concrete way. Yeah. So.
Not greenwashing.
No, we learn how to distinguish greenwashing from real sustainability, which, is a skill. It's like learning how to read a science article. It becomes like after you look at these marketing campaigns from companies about what they're doing with sustainability, you start to build an eye for what has a real impact. And a lot of that's foundational on the science and what makes sense really.
So it's like reading a science article versus a press release, to be able to cut through to the truth. Yeah.
And, the more, I was making that reference because the more science articles you read, the more you're able to understand the jargon and figure out or distill what they're trying to say, because sometimes it's really confusing.
So when you think about, obviously you chose this path of education, and it's one that I think, as Aina and I were saying, it is a bit of a roller coaster of emotions sometimes, right? Like the more you start to understand the world's issues, the more, you maybe get depressed about it, or the more that you see it as like this unsurmountable kind of thing. How do you kind of approach that when every day you're basically learning more and more of the problems that we have to solve? How do you kind of approach that emotionally?
Well, I do learn about the problems a lot, and it does get depressing, but you also learn about the solutions and the frameworks for building solutions. I think different people have different weights on how to solve this problem, whether it's policy, whether it's technology, whether it's activism. I think personally, I'm a technological optimist. So I think that the smart use of technologies that integrate with nature and are, considering the long-term impacts, as we were talking about before with packaging, all these types of solutions that are brought about by technology can get us to a place, hopefully, where we can sustain and be within our planetary boundaries.
And getting very specific then with vertical farming, what do you think about vertical farming, and why are you involved in it, when you can have so many other, ways to contribute to climate change or other things?
Well, I'm very passionate about food systems in general. And so there's a million different sustainability challenges in different industries, whether it's energy or, tons of different things. But I decided to focus on food systems because it's a just sort of innate passion that I have. And I think vertical farming is, obviously a hyper technological approach to farming. It's basically on the spectrum of no tech to all tech. It's all tech essentially. And that's not to say that I always think the highest technological solution is the best, but I think within food systems, there's a big opportunity to use vertical farming for specific applications. And I think Farm.One has sort of been thinking about it in that way. And that's why I think it's a really nice fit where we are in the market with the technology that we're using.
And if you wanted to be a naysayer about vertical farming, if you wanted to attack it from a sustainability point of view, what kind of things would you be critical about, and what do you think the industry needs to do better to solve those kind of things?
Yeah, I think, I think time will tell on some of the feasibility of vertical farming certain crops, and because ultimately the business that is operating the farm has to sustain itself. But from a sustainability perspective, I think we need to get specific about conducting life cycle assessments for the production of certain crops and comparing those life cycle assessments to other methodologies for growing the same crops. So, I mean, if you look around our farm, you see a lot of plastic, and you see a lot of metal, and you see LED lights. There's all this stuff not only is energy intensive to manufacture, but comes into our facility from all around the world. So I think, compared to field agriculture, there's a lot more resource that goes into getting it up and running. But when you operate a field farm in an unsustainable way, you're often applying heavy amounts of chemicals. You're escaping carbon from the soil into the air, contributing to global warming. So there's a lot of different differences and a lot of things to compare between this methodology of farming. And I don't think that vertical farming is the sole solution for the problems that we face in our food system. And so, I mean, I think the jury's still out whether or not, this is a truly sustainable endeavor. I think it really depends on the specific application.
How dare you, Jess?
Oh my goodness. When you think about if you had to redesign the food system.
You got half an hour.
Well, how would you reimagine that?
Well, I think this trend of building field farms that are using regenerative practices is a really important large-scale change that we need to address. I think, if all the farms in the United States used regenerative practices, we would reduce our carbon emissions within the food industry by like 50% or something. And that's like the food industry as a whole. So, that's a significant opportunity. And I think one that, we aren't really addressing here at Farm.One, but should be taken seriously. But there's a whole other range of solutions after the food leaves the farm that we also need to think about, whether that's storage. I mean, we made some significant advancements in storage when, canning came along and refrigeration. But I still think there's opportunity to reduce the amount of food waste by, improving technology in that area. I think there's also a tremendous amount of policy changes that could be done to promote greater food access, whether that's within the United States or around the world. I think technology exists in the United States for agriculture on the field at a high degree, but that technology isn't necessarily distributed equally in areas that might benefit from it most. So these are just like some of the issues, but you could talk about this for a whole another 100 episode podcast, which I'm sure there are 10 of them.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have any other questions for Jess?
Yeah. So Jess, when in the vertical farming industry, we often talk about using X amount % less land, using X % less water, emitting fewer greenhouse gases and that type of thing. So if what you're saying is we need to look at sort of the entire cycle of the impact and of the entire supply chain in the food system, is that greenwashing, right? Or is that real when we think about vertical farming and when people are thinking about getting into the industry, or consumers that are thinking of shopping from a farm like Farm.One, are these real? How should they think about this?
Yeah, I think, for just to focus on one specific parameter that you talked about, which was water, I think, it is true that recirculating water through our system saves water, and thus the plants require less. Well, they still need as much water, but the overall amount of water in the system compared to a field is a lot less, and there's less runoff. But I think, the benefits of that are more detailed. For instance, our farm's in the New York area, and there really isn't a huge water shortage here like there is out west, where there's a tremendous amount of drought. And so we're essentially replacing the production out west with production in New York, made possible by being indoors and vertical and using LEDs. So I think the metric there is not that we're X percentage more efficient with water, but that where we're using the water, it is less, but it's also in a more sustainable way. If we're using a vertical farm out west, then that claim would be more accurate, which I think it goes back to the point where it's all in the details of where the farm is, how the farm operates, what crops it produces, what customers it serves. It's a case-by-case basis.
So how do we deal with that when we're looking at these factory farms that are opening tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of square feet of growing area? The energy usage must just be immense. I mean, are renewables at a place where economically, and also are we producing enough to be able to supply that? Is that how should the industry think of that?
Well, renewables is another topic, but I think these farms that are factory farms producing a large amount of leafy greens most of the time, can use renewable sources of energy and can reduce the burden on water resources. I think the challenge is making it so that the economics make sense for those companies, but also like how long those facilities can operate for. If it's 10 years versus 50 years with the same equipment, that makes a big difference. So I don't think that those are necessarily problematic or the solution. I just think it really depends on the details, which is not a great answer, but it's really, I think, the truth.
It's a can of worms.
It is a can of worms.
Yeah, but I think partly the point that you're making is, as an industry, as a nascent industry of vertical farming, we have to be okay with that complexity. I think that the days where you just say to the consumer, "Oh, we're 95% more efficient," or something, those days are numbered. Because the moment you do look into the details, maybe it's better, maybe it's worse, but it's not that simple. And I think as consumers, certainly, I know that the people who buy from us, but certainly people who go to farmers markets, people who care about their food, that kind of thing, people do want to know behind the label. They want to get the full details, and so I think we have to, as an industry, get better at that, because I think it has been too simplistic historically.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there isn't a way to compare apples to apples, but I think we can draw from the field of sustainability in much more developed industries to use standard practices for life cycle assessments and for cost-benefit analyses to be able to look at the environmental impacts. There's a whole reporting structure for sustainability called GRI that I don't think really any company within the vertical farming industry has produced. I mean, we need to get more specific. And as Rob said, I think you can't just make a blanket statement like we use 95% less water, because it is a bit of a greenwashing scenario in that case.
Michael, any other questions for Jess?
Yeah. So if someone wanted to be Jess at a vertical farming company, aside from reading a ton of science articles and ignoring press releases in any form of advertising, what would your advice be?
I think, there's a lot of products online that can give you the opportunity to build your own little system and experiment. I think once you get your hands dirty, and you start connecting pumps and tubes and trying to grow plants, one, you'll figure out if this is something you really want to do. And two, you'll really gain an appreciation for just how the hydroponic systems work. And I think if you were to do that and then come into an interview at a vertical farm and have sort of this more nuanced perspective, the people you're talking to will appreciate that, because I think when you explain vertical farming, it can make a lot of sense, and you can say, oh, okay, yeah, you stack up and use lights, but understanding the details is really critical. And I think it's pretty low cost and easy to start getting some experience just getting your hands on it. There isn't like a really established academic program or anything like that to learn about vertical farming or really hydroponics, although there are some. I think that's a good way to get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for answering our questions, Jess, and being
He had no choice.
and being our guest this
They
week.
forced me to do this.